I'm back with the nerdiest headset ever. I'm not gonna lie, I hate this thing, so if I move it around, fudge it, whatever, you know why. It's because I hate this thing. So, I apologize for my absences of late, but hopefully things are going well. I did post test grades, some observations from that. Obviously I do the lectures, and it's A, because I like doing them. But B, also as a supplement to the book, because the book has a lot of material. Unfortunately, you are responsible for all of that material, reading the book, blah, 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 blah. I do this to try and help give you a better understanding of where to go. So, hopefully that will help with that. But really, your biggest ally in this is going to be the study guide that I put up, which the one for test 2 should be put up by the end of today, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Because that study guide is going to get you where you need to go. And the PowerPoints are to help guide your reading, because sometimes it gets really boring and it drones on, and so the PowerPoints are meant to give you a sense of direction. And that's why I say, if you have questions, ask, because sometimes having one wrong word can make the difference in having a right answer and a wrong answer. And it sucks, because if we were actually in a classroom, I would be able to emphasize that. But with the nature of this course, unfortunately, that's not so. So here's the thing. In terms of where to get your knowledge from, number 1 is the book. That's at the top. Number 2 is the lectures. That's a supplement. Number 3 is the study guide. The study guide is meant to push you in the right direction. So hopefully that helps. What I am going to go ahead and do today is kind of catch up on what's going to be on chapter 2 as far as from the book, and kind of lecture on that. I had put up a discussion not too long ago asking about people's majors and why they were taking this class, etc., etc. As a result of that discussion, I have decided that I will be posting material on chapter 9, but it will not be on the exam. So for exam 2, focus on chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you're like, oh, that's 4 chapters. They're 4 very lengthy, very important chapters. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to those. Chapter 5 talks about consciousness. With that, it comes with defining consciousness. It also comes with talking about altered states of consciousness. Yes, this is the drug chapter, so get excited. Feel free to ask questions. It kind of starts off talking about cute little video of a kid who had surgery and was given ketamine as a sedative or kind of a relaxant, and he has some interesting effects on ketamine. Whenever his arm is covered up, he thinks it's gone and that it's been chopped off or something. And so just kind of showing you what some of the substances can do and some of the more interesting effects. Also, not for the squeamish, there is a video of an open brain surgery, and it talks about mapping the brain and how it's one of the latest technologies in brain tumor treatment. So that's pretty interesting too. Again, kind of going back to chapter 1, we're talking a lot about pioneers in the field. We're talking about Wundt and Titchener. And again, they're focused on introspection, because that's part of consciousness. You have to be conscious in order to perform introspection, right? But the bigger, more important kind of overarching thing is William James. William James believed in consciousness as a stream, and I think this has kind of happened to all of us at some point, where we start on one thing and then, time goes on or a conversation passes and we're like, how did we even get on this subject? Like, what started this? And that's what William James calls the stream of consciousness. You don't necessarily know where it's going or how these things are associated, but it will guide the course of a conversation and your train of thought. So Yeah, going along with that, talks about levels of awareness as well. Not all consciousness is created equal. For people that function at 8 a.m. without coffee, um, you're focusing on kind of a different stage of awareness than people who have had caffeine or are morning people. They tend to be in a higher level of consciousness. So just be aware of that. Not all levels of awareness are the same. Executive functioning. Executive and functioning is really important. For people with ADHD and with autism and higher level disorders, it can impair executive functioning. So executive functioning is the part of your brain that is in charge of planning and critical thinking and things like that. It's higher level thought processes. And there's actually a little kind of article in there talking about that. But higher order complex cognitive functions, thinking, planning, problem solving, and for a lot of kids with developmental disorders, for a lot of people with ADHD, executive functioning is impaired. So things that we know to do, like, oh, I have to set out meat before I leave the house today so that I can come home and cook it tonight. They don't think about these things. There's no planning or preparation. They just deal with things as they are in front of them. And that's part of executive functioning. And it can be very problematic whenever that's impaired. One of the things that I've seen, there's a book called Brilliant but Scattered, I think it is. Anyway, it's a book on ADHD functioning and improving executive functioning. Scheduling is a really big help with that too. One of the things on levels of awareness too is it talks about the subconscious awareness. Remember about Freud? Freud believed that a lot of things happened on an unconscious level. So that no awareness, that subconscious thought, there's still things that are happening there according to Freud. And I mean, I think a lot of people can agree with that. You don't always think about what you're doing whenever you say something stupid, maybe. You don't have that foresight to be like, oh, I shouldn't have said that until after it's come out of your mouth. Because these things happen unconsciously or subconsciously. Next, talking about the difference between controlled and automatic processes. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go really deep into that. Some activities require conscious thought. Some of them do not. For any of you that drive, you know that is kind of the case. You can leave your house and make it to work or to school and not even remember you driving there. You did. You attended the behaviors. You had the attending behaviors of driving. You didn't get in a car accident on the way. But that doesn't mean that you are all there and consciously in. Normally it's a route that you take every day, so you don't have to put much thought into it. And that's why it's kind of an automatic process. Automatic processing allows information to be collected and saved with little to no conscious effort. Daydreaming is an automatic process. Sometimes you just doze off. You may kind of zone out, whatever you want to call it. It's an automatic process because our brain can't be attentive 100% of the time. Sometimes our brain needs to take a break. So, and daydreaming and zoning out, those are ways of the brain doing that. Next, talking about sleep. Circadian rhythms. So whether you know it or not, your brain knows what time of day it is. It can tell by the amount of light that your eyes take in, and it sends signals to the brain that says, hey, it's daylight, you're supposed to be awake right now, or hey, there's not a whole lot of light out here, you should probably be asleep. And your brain takes those things and its concept of time and it regulates this pattern. Now, for people that work nights, obviously this can be easily disrupted. Because it is not a natural thing for our bodies to be awake during the nighttime. It takes a lot of conscious effort sometimes, changing sleep cycles, things like that. And the thing is, too, this affects a lot of different aspects of your life. And it affects not only when you're awake or asleep, but it also regulates a lot of biological processes. When you're hungry, your blood sugar levels, blood pressure, all of those things. Circadian rhythms help dictate all of these things. Because as you go to lay down at night, your blood pressure changes because your body's getting ready for sleep. So it'll change accordingly. And that's why disruption of the circadian cycle can have some very intense effects. So the small part of your brain that regulates that, it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And it is basically kind of like your little internal alarm clock, I guess, that says, hey, okay, we're at noon. You should probably be eating lunch now. All right, gonna work for another 5-6 more hours. Then time to drive home. Oh, hey, what do you know? Sun's getting real low, big guy. Getting ready for a sundown. So, you kind of wind down your activities after eating dinner, and then it starts to get dark, and then next thing you know, boom, time to go to sleep. And your brain will sleep. And a lot of times, I know you probably had it happen, where you wake up before your alarm. Maybe 2 minutes before your alarm. Is that not like the most annoying thing in the world? But it does happen because your brain knows, hey, you wake up at 6 o'clock, you have stuff to do. Hey, wake up. So, and that's all the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. So, jet lag, shift work, that's all of the things that disrupt those cycles. Stages of sleep and the brain waves. Alpha waves, sort of associated with sleepiness or drowsiness. Beta waves are high frequency waves. Those are your awake kind of default waves. Whenever you start to go to sleep, beta transitions to alpha, and then just like waves, they have wavelengths and amplitudes. They'll come down a little bit, they'll be wider, and that's how you know that you're getting into a more relaxed, drowsy state. If you go back, I think it's chapter 1 or 2 where it talks about the ways of studying the brain. There's a picture of an EEG, and that is what your brain, it monitors the electrical activity in your brain when you sleep. Because a lot of times when people sleep, that's when they have seizures and things like that. So they'll have to do sleep studies and see if there's something that's causing that. But it's pretty interesting to see that electrical activity and how it can change. With that too, talking about the stages of sleep, just know that stages N1 through N3 are your non-REM sleep cycles. Know that. Also know that REM sleep is called paradoxical sleep. So those beta waves that are present whenever you're alert and awake, it's very similar to the way your brain looks in REM sleep, because your brain is working and is processing things even as you sleep. So there's a lot of electrical activity, but it is also your most restful sleep, because that's where your body processes things and kind of calms down and rebuilds itself. There's a lot of repair and restorative functions that happen during sleep, and because of that, I think that's kind of why you see a lot of that brain activity. So hopefully the book made that fairly clear as well. Talking about sleep disorders. Talked about somnambulism and things like that. I'm not going to focus too much on that. I am going to focus pretty heavily on insomnia. The lack of ability to go to sleep or stay asleep. One of the things that is present in a lot of, almost all mental health disorders a lot of times is disruption in sleep cycles. It's present with bipolar disorder. It's present with major depressive disorder. It's a big deal, and that not being able to sleep is a key symptom of that. It talks about night terrors too. I probably won't really be focusing on that. Kind of nightmares are kind of something that everyone has. Those are not in and of themselves maladaptive. Night terrors though, sleep paralysis, those kind of things, those are, pretty important as well. But I probably won't be testing on that. Really focus on insomnia, focus on narcolepsy, and focus on sleep apnea. Sleep apnea and sleep hypopnea, I'm not going to ask you the difference on it, but just so you know, hypopnea is a partial obstruction of the airway during sleep. So a lot of times they will not be able to breathe as efficiently as they would if they were in a different position or if they were not asleep. Sleep apnea. Apnea is a complete absence of airflow. People will literally stop breathing while they sleep. And because of that, if I'm not mistaken, I think rates of this are climbing fairly quickly as well. It is tied to obesity and being overweight. That is one of the things that can affect it, but I mean, not to say that that necessarily causes it. But also, they have machines. They have what they call a CPAP, which is a breathing apparatus that people wear should they have sleep apnea that regulates their breathing while they sleep. Though sometimes they can be very loud, so their efficiency or their effectiveness is sometimes questioned. But hey, better than not breathing at all, right? So, dreams and altered state of consciousness. We're going back to Freud here and talking more about the unconscious and the subconscious. So, there is latent content and manifest content. So, one of the notorious dreams, I guess, is showing up in front of a class naked. I personally have never had the dream. Yes. Because that would probably be even worse in my particular profession, but a lot of people claim to have the dream. So whenever you walk into the classroom, the chairs that you see, the people that you see in there, the chalkboard, all of these things are manifest content. They're things that are physically present within the dream, not like actually in your brain, but things that you see. So that's the manifest content, the literal things that you see in there, the apparent meaning, the objects, things like that, remembered storyline. So your latent content is a little bit more sophisticated. So you show up to class naked. What does that mean? Maybe it is an expressed desire that you want to go to class naked. Doubtful, but maybe. You don't know. So one of the things with Freud, or kind of psychoanalytic analysis of these things, a lack of clothes may indicate vulnerability, a level of exposure, or kind of just openness or expressiveness that maybe you're uncomfortable with. Maybe you feel that you've overshared with someone. Maybe you feel that you're there for someone too often. Maybe you're in a new relationship and you feel that it's going too fast. So you feel kind of left out there, hanging out, exposed. That would be the latent content, the kind of representation of what the dream means, things like that. So understand those things. Manifest is literal, latent is representative and kind of analytical. You're like, Dross, how much of this is actually real and how much is BS? Here's the thing. We're talking about Freud. Freud did a lot for the field of psychology. However, you also have to remember that Freud was popular, but his theories are not subject to a lot of experimentation. How can I make somebody have a particular dream? I can't do it. So it's really, really hard to test these things. There's a lot of logic, there's a lot of assumption that kind of goes along with this. So keep that in mind. Know it. Knowing it and believing it are two different things. So take it and do with it what you will. If you're a follower of Freud and you're like, man, this guy's spot on. Cool, that's on you. But as psychologists, we tend to be more empirical and value more empirically supported methods. And that's just something that Freud's theories unfortunately can't do. Activation synthesis model maintains that dreams have no meaning, that the belief in the dreaming is completely random neural firings. Maybe, maybe not. Also talks about hypnosis. Alright, so here's the deal with hypnosis. You guys are like, this is real. Here's my answer to you. It doesn't matter if it's real. Why? APA, last count, I think we were at 53 sections of the APA, the American Psychological Society. Don't quote me on that, but I think we were up to 53. Anyway, the APA has given hypnosis and hypnotherapy its own section, which means that there's enough scientific findings out there to support its utility and its validity within the scientific realm. Okay? Big factors in that include personal subjectivity. If you want it to be real, they kind of say that you have to kind of want it to be true or want it to be real in order for these things to work on you. The point is, it is regulated by the APA now, so there is at least enough scientific evidence for it to get recognized by our governing body. So, with that being said, can you go around making people bark like a dog? Maybe, maybe not. But ethically, the APA won't let you do that. So you're safe, hopefully. Again, it is interesting, and there are some situations and some cases where it has been found to be beneficial. Probably one reason why it is so regulated by the APA, though, is because of the idea of false memories, things like that. It plays a very big deal. So, because of that, and because people were looking at trying to do it anyway, we said, hey, we need to look into this scientifically. What does the data say? And, okay, what's allowed and what's not. So that's hypnosis in a nutshell. An altered state of consciousness, allowing for changes in perceptions and behaviors, which results from suggestions made by a hypnotist. There is some similarity in brain activity as well between hypnosis and meditation. So that is worthy to note as well. Moving on to the fun stuff. Your drugs are bad, okay? So psychoactive drugs, substances that can change and cause changes in psychological activities such as sensation, perception, attention, judgment, memory, self-control, emotion, thinking, and behavior. Substances that change the conscious experience or alter consciousness. If it can change the way you see the world, the way you see it, the way you hear it, the way you taste it, the way you smell it, whatever. If it changes the way that you process the world around you, if it changes your brain and your brain chemistry, alters the levels of neurotransmitters in your brain, all of these things, that's psychoactive substances. Your book breaks it down in 3 categories: depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. So depressants are what is going to slow your brain down. It will also slow a lot of your other biological functions, may slow your heartbeat, may lower your blood pressure, etc., etc. Your stimulants are your uppers, so things that are going to make your heart beat faster, caffeine, things that are going to increase your blood pressure, things like that. And then your hallucinogens, things that will may make you see things that aren't there, or may alter the way that you see things, maybe change the things that you hear, making you hear things that are not actually being said, things like that. A hallucinogenic state, things that may or may not be part of reality. So again, depressants slow down mental and physical activity. That is on the slide. Going to alcohol. The alcohol is, after caffeine, the most widely used substance. And not this textbook, but another book that I have kind of compares it to the Swiss Army knife of substances. And that whenever it comes to alcohol, we use when we're depressed, but we also use it to celebrate. Whenever we go to weddings, we have glasses of champagne. However, whenever we have breakups, a lot of people tend to take shots. Alcohol is really used in a variety of situations and for multiple methods. So because of that, influences how widely it's used. Binge drinking. That I probably will ask about. So talking about, one of the things with that too is that it is a certain number of standard drinks. Defining what a standard drink is, typically it tends to be 1 beer, 1 shot of alcohol, or 1 glass of wine. Whenever we say 1 glass of wine, I don't mean the Trenta cup from Starbucks. I mean like a normal half glass of wine, in which you will take and fill the wine glass halfway. Those tend to be considered the normal standard drinks. So, it talks about binge drinking, going on to 163, how many drinks that takes. I can't can't remember if it was 4 or 5. Let me double check it. Wow. Okay, so it won't be on there because I don't remember if it was 4 or 5. Anyway, talking about the definition of that, something to note also, substance abuse and substance dependence. Substance abuse is continued use despite negative consequences. So, maybe mom and dad have threatened to kick you out of the house if you continue drinking. You do it anyway. That's substance abuse. Substance dependent is that there are trademarks of withdrawal or tolerance. Withdrawal being that you have violent bodily reactions for whenever you do not consume your subject of choice or your substance of choice. Also tolerance, and that there may be more, that it requires more to have the same effect. So that kind of goes along with that. This is still really bothering me. I still want to find it. Oh. Wow. Alright, moving on. That was page 163. So. Okay, so in case you didn't notice, I paused it because I'm kind of mad at myself for putting this in the PowerPoint. Not as easy to find in the book as I originally anticipated. Binge drinking. So apparently it can also be linked to blood alcohol level, but typically occurs when men have 5 or more drinks within the period of 2 hours and 4 or more drinks for women in 2 hours. Why is that different? Because men and women metabolize alcohol differently. It has to do with distribution of fat and adipose tissue within the body. But yeah, so for the PowerPoint, feel free to kind of write that in 4 or 5. Obviously, needless to say, because there are some discrepancies between the CDC and the book, I will not be using that as a test question. So at this point, it's just for general knowledge, and you're welcome. Anyway, continuing on. So moving on from alcohol, talks a lot about alcoholism. 1 in however many continue down the path to alcoholism. Really, whenever they say alcoholism, probably what they're looking at is dependence criteria of diagnosis. Just some interesting things from National Institute of Health on that. So enjoy those little links. Hope that helps out. Going back to this, depressants. Going along with that. Depressants are a class of psychoactive drugs that depress or slow down activity in the central nervous system. Going along with that, barbiturates. Depressant drug often used to help people sleep. Can be lethal whenever it's combined with alcohol. I think Brittany Murphy had traces of these in her system whenever she was found dead, as well as Heath Ledger. These are more often than not going to be abused by people who are legitimately prescribed them, or maybe shared between friends, something like that. These are not really like go out and buy them off the street, that kind of thing. They obviously can, but they're probably not as easy to get a hold of as some other substances, because they have to come from a doctor, they have to be prescribed. So a lot of times it may involve stealing and things like that. So tranquilizers, Xanax, Valium, they reduce anxiety and induce relaxation. Narcotics and opiates. These are derived from the opium poppy. So your Vicodins, your oxycodones, Percocets, things like that. Getting your wisdom teeth taken out, the things that they give you afterwards, those are usually opiates and or narcotics. So They depress the central nervous system, and why these work to relieve pain is that it slows down and kind of dulls pain receptors. So it will help kind of alleviate that. So going along with that, stimulants, again, world's most widely used psychoactive drug, my favorite, caffeine. Love it, love caffeine, but it is a psychoactive substance. It speeds up the processes in my body, which at 8 o'clock in the morning with a cup of caffeine, generally a good thing. So, going along with that, caffeineism refers to an overindulgence in caffeine, or just kind of over-caffeination. Nicotine, main psychoactive ingredient in all forms of tobacco. Hopefully you guys knew that already. Going along, talking about amphetamines. So going along with that, amphetamines, upper stimulant drugs, things like that. Crystal meth, talking about those things. It's become a real problem, especially in kind of lower income areas. For those of you that have seen Breaking Bad, things like that. Increases the release of certain neurotransmitters, releases a lot of dopamine. Now, what I need you to understand about dopamine, and I'm going to have to explain this again later in terms of serotonin, but, so, this is a dopamine receptor. This is dopamine, okay? It goes, it meets the dopamine receptor, yay, brain is happy. There's a sense of reward, a sense of fulfillment, things are good, right? Now, what'll happen is it takes a while for the dopamine to find its home. If the dopamine doesn't find its receptor, then the effects of dopamine cannot be felt. That sense of reward, that sense of happiness. So, what will happen is that same receptor, people use drugs, and then all of a sudden their system is filled with dopamine, and there's not enough receptors to go around. So your brain says, oh, hey, I only have 20 receptors, and I've got like 50 molecules of dopamine here. I obviously released way too much dopamine. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. Next time around, I'll just put out 20. Well, those 20 receptors were being used by dopamine and drugs, because those substances create that same feeling. So your body thinks it's creating more of the neurotransmitter than it actually is. So as a result, because we have this thing called homeostasis, your body seeks to provide level amounts, kind of level, equal ratios, because you don't want to put more dopamine than you need out there, but you need every receptor to be filled. So that's why you see higher levels of depression and things like that in people who use, because their body thought that it didn't need as much dopamine as it did, because it was constantly being filled by crack or cocaine or meth or whatever it is that's filling those receptor spots. So it takes time for the brain to figure out, oh, hey, I have like these 10 empty dopamine receptors. I should probably start making more dopamine to get you back to that baseline level of where you need to be. Hopefully that makes sense. Serotonin works similarly. SSRIs, so talking about medications, what happens with that is you have a certain level of serotonin that's released into the brain, and what'll happen is that the serotonin doesn't make it to the receptor in an expedient fashion, so people take SSRIs, things like serotonin, or things like Paxil, Prozac, things like that. And what that does is it keeps those serotonin molecules in the brain longer before they're reabsorbed, in order to give them time to make it to the receptor to increase that feeling of happiness. So hopefully that makes sense. Whew, I'm exhausted after that. Alright, going back to this, I also did the kind of faces of meth thing. Hopefully, you guys have seen that. Um, it does wreak a lot of havoc on the body in a relatively short period of time. Cocaine, derived from the cocoa plant, can either be snorted or smoked, depending on if it's cocaine or crack. Very short duration of time, especially if snorting, because you're crossing the blood-brain barrier, which means that the effects take place really quickly. It also does not last long. Depletes neurotransmitters. Whenever you take the chips of cocaine and smoke them, that is called crack cocaine. And hopefully you guys like the Dave Chappelle meme, because I was like, perfect. Anyway, hallucinogens. Yes, they count marijuana as a hallucinogen. Most textbooks nowadays actually do. Going along with that, there is ecstasy, Molly, whatever you want to call it. And that kind of dumps a lot of serotonin in the brain at one time, which gives you a feeling of happiness. But again, if you have to have X or Molly to secrete serotonin, your body will stop doing it on its own, because you're going to tell it when to do it with substances. So that's why continued use of these things is really bad. Honestly, any use of it is bad, and there's physical effects to all of it, but prolonged use in particular can deregulate your body. LSD, the fun kind of thing with that, people love to point out that it was used as part of a military experiment, things like that. Yes, kind of interesting. It did include a thing about adverse effects of marijuana. You guys, it's not legal. I'm sorry. I know. Medicinal uses, medical uses, stuff like that. Point is, if you're walking down the street with it and a cop finds it in your pocket, you can get arrested. Whether you think that's fair or not, that is the law. This is what I ask people. Most common method of use for marijuana is what? Smoking, right? And people ask me, well, Dross, can that be bad for you? Take a piece of paper, light it up and smoke it. Is that good for you? No. So, in and of itself, is the substance good for you, bad for you? I don't know. There has been some pretty interesting medical uses of it, but you know, anytime you smoke it, it's going to affect your lungs, respiratory system, blah, 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 blah. So, anyway, going on with that, I think that pretty much, the book focuses a lot on meditation. I'm not going to focus on it that much by way of asking questions about it or anything, but do know it and kind of, you know, understand that there are a lot of positive effects that come along with it, and hopefully that will help you out. So there was chapter 5 in a nutshell. Hopefully that helps you guys out. You guys, I do these things to try and help, but really, you gotta read. You know, that's the thing with an online class. It's not like you can show up and I can throw this information at you on a daily basis. It doesn't work that way. So please do me a favor, help me out and actually read so that you can ask questions that I can answer. You kind of need to point me in the right direction of what you're having troubles with. So hopefully that helps out, and you know what you need.